I want to talk a bit about Apple,
Okay.
and a bit about your time in jewelry and that sort of transition. So when you left Anderson, you went to a jewelry company,
Right.
which you said is harder than software
Yes.
to survive.
Yes, it was a downtown LA jewelry manufacturer. We sold to jewelry retailers. So we didn't sell directly to people. We sold to retailers who sold to people. So Tiffany, that kind of thing. And the jewelry business is a very small business, not a lot of growth, very personal business, and you had to sell. With Apple, you like walk into a store and you're ready to buy, right? That's not how it is in the jewelry business. So you have to sell to people. So I really learned how to sell. This is a very good skill.
Yeah.
Because to me, when you come down to entrepreneurship, there's only two roles. You got to make it and you got to sell it. And so if you're not an engineer, guess what? You got to sell it.
Yeah.
And so selling is a crucial skill.
And that brought you to Apple.
Yeah.
And you started out as chief evangelist.
No, I started off as software evangelist. Chief
Software
evangelist was round two.
I apologize. Okay, so tell me a bit about that experience, about that role.
So I was brought into Apple to convince software companies and hardware companies to create Mac products. And this was at a time where Apple was fairly successful with the Apple II. Certainly wasn't the powerhouse that it is today. Many people thought it could never go beyond hobbyists and education, K through 12 education computing. And the business standard was MS-DOS from IBM/Microsoft. And so here was this new operating system, incompatible with everything. Tools weren't developed yet, flaky company, and we were asking basically companies to bet their lives on it. So it was selling in the purest form. It's a great challenge. It's a great challenge.
And did you have a chance to work with Mr. Jobs at that point?
Yes, I was not a direct report, but I was obviously in the division.
Yeah.
So that was quite an experience in and of itself.
What was he like back then? I know he's sort of evolved over time.
All the books and all the movies and all the things you see and hear about him are basically true. He was very difficult to work for, but I don't think any of us who work for him would trade places. None of us would. We didn't leave that traumatized. It's not like we want to go through therapy and have that erased, from our minds. It was a great experience. And from the outside looking in, if you hear the anecdotes, you think, oh my God, what a horrible thing. But you have to be inside the tornado to understand that that's just who he was. And people like him have a different operating system. So it's very difficult to understand, what it was like unless you were in there and unless you appreciated what he was doing. But fundamentally, he truly did change the world. And that was a great experience. I would not be here without that experience. You would not be interviewing me. I promise you.
No, you came back after you left for a short period,
Yeah.
and you came back as chief evangelist.
Yes.
So now, what was that like? Because
Yeah.
I know you were sort of finding your way.
This is in 1995. I came back to Apple because Apple was supposed to die. Hard to imagine. Apple's the most valuable company in the world, and back then, 95 was supposed to die. So I came back because I didn't want Apple to die, and they made me an Apple Fellow. I was the last fellow ever made at Apple. I don't know if that's a negative or a positive statement about me, but I'm the last time they ever did that.
So what is an Apple Fellow?
It was a sort of line position. I didn't have a staff. I was just supposed to be there. Okay, so most fellows are more technical and engineering. You're supposed to be thinking about the future of printing or the future of chips or whatever, right? But mine was a marketing fellowship. So my job was to make sure that the Macintosh cult didn't die. So I didn't have a huge staff. It wasn't a huge department. It was me and a couple people, and we just did whatever it took to make sure the cult didn't die and sustained Apple in a time where many people thought Apple would die. That's probably the best work of my life.
Really?
Yeah.
And then you moved on to your next step in your...
I started companies. I started investment banking firm / venture capitalist. Today, I'm a writer and a speaker, and I also work for a company out of Sydney, Australia called Canva. And Canva is in the business of online graphic design, sort of a fast, free, and much easier product to use than Photoshop. So it is graphic design for the rest of us.
Now you've also, you're releasing 2 new books.
Yes.
I'd love for you to talk about those.
So I have, well, it's really 1.5 new books. So the next new book will be out in the first week of December, and it's called The Art of Social Media. And it explains more than 100 tips about how to optimize social media, from your building your profile, how to curate, how to post, how to comment, how to respond to comments, all that stuff. Just like a core dump of everything I've learned with social media, co-written with a woman who I think is the best social media person in the world. Like literally, I know everybody in social media. I know entire agencies in social media. I would put her up against entire agencies. And so it's the 2 of us. That's the next book. And then after that, about 4 months from now, there'll be a book called The Art of the Start version 2. So The Art of the Start is a book that I wrote for entrepreneurs, how to start companies. And it's 10 years old. So that book doesn't have anything about social media, crowdsourcing, cloud computing, some minor details like that. So I decided I would revise the book and add cloud and crowd and social media and that kind of stuff. And then I kept going and going and going. And now it's basically a total rewrite. It's almost a total rewrite. And I think it's used here in some entrepreneurship classes. So that is, do you know who Peter Drucker was or is?
Sounds very familiar.
Okay. Well, Peter Drucker was like probably the best management writer in the world. Okay. And he wrote a book that's just, well, he wrote many books, but one of his books was just the de facto sort of Bible on entrepreneurship. And that's what I'm trying to write. There are books, there are some great books like from Eric Ries and Steve Blank about the minimum viable product and the lean startup and all that. So, and people like Malcolm Gladwell, they write a book about blinking and outliers and, all that kind of stuff. So those books are 200 pages about the concept of tipping, or 200 pages about lean startup. But I don't think an entrepreneur could not just read one of those books and say, okay, now I know. Because an entrepreneur has to move about 10 pieces on the chessboard at once. So my book is not 200 pages about one topic, about why you need a minimum viable product. Minimum viable product is about 10 pages out of 200, because minimum viable product is just one thing you need to do. You also need to recruit. You need to raise money. You need to evangelize. And so I take all those topics down the road. And theoretically, if you bought Out of the Start version 2, you'd never have to buy any other book about it.
So tell me a little bit about Anderson. I know your one word for Anderson is modern.
Yes.
But tell me a little bit about what's behind that and your experience here.
Well, see, my theory is that for marketing to work, it has to occupy some space. And it should occupy a space that it's difficult for anybody else to occupy. And it has to be very simple. It's not about, patent pending, curve jumping, paradigm shifting, scalable enterprise class stuff. It has to occupy one word. So a very easy way to explain this is cars. So, with cars, Ferrari equals sex. Volvo is safety, right? Porsche is probably engineering. Toyota is reliability. Fiat is unreliability. I mean, it comes out to one word. So I think the one word that describes UCLA is modern, because you're in LA, which is a modern city. It is near the content creation mecca, if you will. And I think there's a great emphasis on technology here and social media. And to me, social media is the key. It's fast and it's free and it's ubiquitous and it's going to just be the most powerful force.
What are you most proud of in your life?
What am I most proud of in my life? From a professional standpoint, probably the Macintosh division work. I now have 13 books under my belt, which is like 12 more than I thought I would ever have. So I think that I'll have some kind of legacy there. When I die, I want people to say, Guy empowered people. He empowered people with his writing, his speaking, sometimes with his investment, his advice. So that, but probably what gives me the greatest pleasure and probably pride is my kids.
When they initially asked you, we initially thought it was going to be with the dean, and I really pushed, to get more student involvement because UCLA Anderson is very student run. So it's a testament to the school and the culture here that I'm here,
cool.
A lowly student. So
Cool.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, great.
Here we go.
Thank you so much.